Well, at face value, you might think that the final goal of any INFJ is to be understood, but it's not necessarily the case. Things are more complicated than that. It might actually feel somewhat threatening to some INFJs to think that they might actually be fully seen or fully understood by another person. Of course, this is not going to apply for all INFJs. There are INFJs who would absolutely love the idea of being fully seen and of being fully understood, and who would embrace that very much, and in fact could play a big part also in what makes them attracted to someone who makes them feel seen, someone who makes them feel understood, not misunderstood. But it's not the case of every INFJ, because you always have to keep in mind that the self-image of being someone who's misunderstood can serve two purposes, or can rather illustrate two processes. It can illustrate someone who, in both cases, we're talking about people who struggle with issues around self-worth and self-esteem. And it's true that this is very often the case with INFJs. But there's two ways this can express itself via the prism of saying or thinking that I'm misunderstood by most people. The first process is of saying, I'm misunderstood by most people, but hopefully one day I will meet people or a person who will understand me. And when that's the case, I will feel complete. I will feel completed, and I will find happiness. Now, this is a neurotic process also, because it illustrates a certain sense of dependence on the other to bring forward the recognition that one is understood. But nevertheless, it still illustrates a deep desire and sincere wish to feel better understood in such a way that if that were to happen, the INFJ's quality of life and self-worth would generally increase. But the other scenario ought not to be cast aside or ignored, because it also exists. And that's the scenario where the person says they feel misunderstood in a widespread fashion by most people, but are not necessarily looking for being understood. As paradoxical as that sounds, they're not necessarily looking for that. And the reason is actually fairly straightforward once you understand the mechanism. The ego ideal of most INFJs is quite ponderous, it's quite ambitious, usually because a very kind of, we might say, oversized ego ideal, over-ambitious ego ideal comes as a rescue for a feeling of inadequacy at in the present moment. And from this perspective, there is no better way for an INFJ to convince themselves that they are, if not aligned with their ego ideal, but on the way to alignment with their ego ideal, than saying they're misunderstood. Because if your ego ideal, confessed or not confessed to oneself, conscious or not conscious, is to be really special, is to be really at the vanguard, it's easy to then assume that you're not going to be understood by the rest of the population. It's part of your sacrifice, but it's also part of a self-worth reinforcement rather than a damage to the self-worth. And from that perspective, being misunderstood can become part of a mechanism. It's a self-image that contributes to a mechanism of self-worth consolidation and reinforcement, rather than something that ought to be corrected. And here we're close to the likes of Nietzsche, INFJ for me, INTJ for most people, Schopenhauer, INFJs, according to everyone, didn't want to feel understood particularly. There's a link there between being understood and a threat to one's potential ego ideal. Because from the moment you understood, you know you're not special. At least that's how they reason, these particular INFJs. Let me know in the comments what you thought, guys. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget, I've written 2 books on the INFJ personality. The latest one, The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World, available at the first link below on how INFJs can find happiness, purpose, and value and meaning in a world they often consider hostile and with reason. My first book is called The Ecstatic Soul, first book in the Soul series, and it's basically the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind. So if you're interested in the INFJ mind, get this book at the link below. And as usual, guys, I'm very, very grateful for your support, your kind donations to my channel so I can continue making videos. I could not do it without you, so please consider joining my Patreon at the link below. You know that if you join, you get, for a small amount every month or every year, you get access to our Discord server, as well as bonus videos every 2-3 weeks on a topic of your choosing. Please consider it, and I'll talk to you soon, guys.